In the newsroom for us this morning. Hi there, Dominic. Give us your analysis of these strikes. What do you make of them? This feels like Israel has gone up a level with this attack on Iran.
Yeah, this does seem to be Israel going all out to not just to degrade the Iranian nuclear program that it's always regarded as military and an existential threat potentially to the Jewish state, but actually to destroy it completely. And I think, if you talk to military experts about this possibility, and, this is a moment, we have to say that the region and any observers of the Middle East have been, I guess, fearing, but expecting for years, because it's something that the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has made it very much a lifetime ambition to achieve the destruction of that threat. But experts have been pretty sceptical about the chances of Israel achieving and completely following through on this ambition to destroy Iran's nuclear program, because it is buried deep within mountains and underground and hidden away and very secret, and the Iranians have done their level best to protect it from what appears to have been started overnight. I think the couple of questions, obviously, what does Iran do in response? The Iranians have always said that they are attacked in this way, they wouldn't just strike back at Israel. They would assume that it wasn't just the little Satan, as they call Israel, but the great Satan, America, involved as well. Now, the Americans have been saying it's a unilateral strike, but I don't think that will hold much water with the Iranians. They'll believe the Americans were very much complicit in this. And as I say, they've always said that if they are attacked, they would attack America back. So that could be American bases in Iraq, it could be American bases in other parts of the region, it could be American installations in the Gulf. And I think, one scenario, and if the Iranians really want to make the Americans think twice about letting the Israelis continue with this, and certainly the Israelis are saying that this is a kind of rolling program of action, so it's in the Iranians' interest to try and stop it and get the Americans to stop it. Something that would focus minds in Washington would be attacks on not just American bases, but American allies in the Gulf, oil refineries, sinking iffy oil tankers, closing the Straits of Hormuz, turning the Persian Gulf into a war zone would have a pretty immediate and fairly disastrous impact on the world economy. So that's something the Iranians may be considering. Has to be said, though, I think we're not entirely clear what the Iranians have in terms of capability to strike back. They fired hundreds of ballistic missiles in October in the first direct exchange of fire between these two sworn enemies. And what they have left, I think, is an open question. Reportedly, they've fired or launched 100 drones that will be making their slow and ponderous way towards Israel. They've got a lot more than that in their arsenal, and I guess the question is, what do they do next? And also, then, what does America do in response if Israel's attacked? It almost certainly will have to come in on the side of protecting its ally, and then you've got an even more grave and escalating situation in the region.
OK, Dominic, for the moment, thanks very much indeed. So let's get more now from both Deborah Haynes on the military side of the overnight strikes, but also some political reaction as well from Amanda Acas, who's here. And we have heard from the British government, haven't we? Fill us in on who's been saying what.
Yes, indeed. So we've had statements this morning from both the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary really urging de-escalation, calm and diplomatic approach to the situation. So the Prime Minister said the reports of these strikes are concerning. We urge all parties to step back and reduce tensions urgently. Escalation serves no one in the region. Stability in the Middle East must be the priority. We are engaging partners to de-escalate. Now is the time for restraint, calm and a return to diplomacy. Fairly similar but slightly perhaps more punchy lines from David Lammy saying stability in the Middle East is vital for global security, that further escalation is a serious threat to peace and stability. And also then going on to say this is a dangerous moment and I urge all parties to show restraint. I think what's quite interesting about this is that you can see that the diplomatic efforts clearly going on behind the scenes, referenced by Sir Keir Starmer, saying that they're reaching out to all parties involved with this. Also interesting, there isn't an explicit expression of support for Israel here. Previously, when we've seen Israeli action against Iran, albeit in response more directly to attacks from Iran, there's been seen sort of expressions of support in the comments about Israeli right to self-defense. Of course, we know that the situation between the UK and Israel is in a more delicate place than previously, with sanctioning of ministers, with the pressure on the Israeli government over Gaza. We don't know anything about UK officials out in the region. We know, of course, the US had recommended partial evacuation of its embassies in the broader Middle East region. We haven't yet heard anything from the Foreign Office on that. We do, there are reports that David Lammy, who was planning to travel to the US for talks with Marco Rubio about Russia, that's actually been cancelled because of all of this. We don't yet have that confirmed, but that seems likely to be the case given the developing situation. More broadly, the UK position on Iran, obviously, they've been very critical, very concerned about nuclear program in Iran. Of course, the UK was part of that deal struck in 2015 with the Iranians, which then Donald Trump pulled out of. But clearly, I think the UK government very concerned to see what's happening in the Middle East and more broadly about the implications of what's happening with the Iranian nuclear.
OK, Amanda, thanks very much indeed. And we're going to be talking to Deborah in just a moment. But let me just remind you that Israel's President Isaac Herzog has released a statement on X saying the attack was a targeted operation to...
Just so you guys know, I cannot get to Rumble. I'm not sure why I can't get to Rumble, but I can't get to any Rumble link whatsoever. So, because of the fact I can't get there, we are up here. As soon as I can get back to Rumble, we will be going back to Rumble. But there have been significant issues with trying to get to Rumble from internet here in Washington, D.C. So, again, we're going to continue to cover the fact that Israel has launched at least 4 waves of attacks against Iran. Senior Iranian leadership has been killed. Senior Iranian researchers in charge of the nuclear weapons program in Iran have also been killed. Additionally, it is now reported that a nuclear reactor in Iran used for the production of radioactive material for weapons, well, that reactor has been hit and is severely damaged. The IAEA says they are monitoring the situation. So we'll give you more as we get it. Thanks for getting here. Hit that thumbs up.
To degrade and destroy Iran's ability to be able to produce nuclear weapons, so to go after the enrichment facilities, the nuclear scientists, the plants, the vast plants that are well protected, one in particular under a mountain, to destroy Iran's ability to develop the bomb, which Israel sees, of course, as an existential threat to its existence. So plans to do that have always, people have thought, like military specialists, would require the Americans to help, because the American military have the sort of the bunker busting bombs that could potentially, it's the Fordo facility in a mountainside by the city of Qom. They would be able to blast through that and destroy those nuclear facilities in there. It's not clear whether that facility has been targeted. That's not come out from the reports, but certainly the strikes have gone after other nuclear sites, clearly the intent being to degrade Iran's ability to develop the bomb. But further than that, they've also gone after senior military leaders, the Israeli military saying that Iran's top 3 military commanders have been killed as part of this operation. And that really indicates that it's wider. It's, yes, going after the nuclear capability, but also attempting to degrade Iran's ability to be able to conduct the military operation that Israel is clearly anticipating. The fact that it's telling its citizens to stay in bunkers, to stay home. They know that a response will be coming, and they're getting ready to brace themselves for it. But clearly for Israel.
Jeff Kozlow, just so you know, Iran supports terrorist organizations. So you think it's okay for terrorists to have nuclear weapons? Because that's exactly what's going to happen here. If Iran has nuclear weapons, they're going to give those nuclear weapons to terrorists. Then those terrorists are going to use them all over the world. Imagine if 9/11 had been a nuclear bomb as opposed to a few jet airliners. Think about that. Let's see if you're as dumb as your previous statement says you were.
This isn't going to be something that's over, in the next few hours. It seems from the language coming out of the Israeli government that this is the start of a campaign, the goal being to degrade the Iranian nuclear capabilities.
And what do you think we'll see from Iran?
Well, we've already seen the start with these drone strikes. And that's
sure enough.
What they did before with, you'll remember
You're
last
actually
year,
dumber
there
than
were
your previous statement.
two direct confrontations,
Nice knowing you.
overt confrontations. Of course, there have been many constant covert confrontations between Iran and Israel over the decades, but the overt strikes from both sides and from Iran launching a barrage of ballistic and cruise missiles against Israel.
I'm just banning
They've been
stupid
developing
people. No
a
big deal.
huge arsenal of ballistic missiles. So for a start, you can anticipate a large wave of missiles. Presumably, that's presumably what Israel is bracing for.
OK, well, Deborah and Amanda, thanks very much indeed. And I know you'll keep us up to date with all the news developments for the moment. Thank you. Well, earlier we heard from Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. He says Israel targeted Iran's nuclear program, as we were just hearing, as he says it poses a threat to the country's very survival.
This operation will continue for as many days as it takes to remove this threat. For decades, the tyrants of Tehran have brazenly, openly called for Israel's destruction. They've backed up their genocidal rhetoric with a program to develop nuclear weapons. In recent years, Iran has produced enough highly enriched uranium for 9 atom bombs. 9. In recent months, Iran has taken steps that it has never taken before, steps to weaponize this enriched uranium. And if not stopped, Iran could produce a nuclear weapon in a very short time. It could be a year, it could be within a few months, less than a year. This is a clear and present danger to Israel's very survival.
Well, we can get a reaction from the government now, because here with me is Industry Minister Sarah Jones. Very good morning to you. Thanks so much for coming in. What is your reaction to Israel launching strikes on Iran?
Well, of course, this is an emerging situation and we want to see de-escalation. This is a dangerous moment, as the Foreign Secretary has said this morning, and we will be doing all we can, as you would expect, to work with our allies to urge for restraint and for de-escalation in the region.
Did the British government have prior knowledge of the strikes?
We weren't involved in the strikes. Obviously, I can't talk about information about what we did or didn't know. That wouldn't be appropriate. But the priority now, I know, for the Foreign Secretary, who will be leading on this, working closely, of course, with the Prime Minister, is to work with our allies.
And what she said was a classic, yeah, we knew all about
and
it.
to de-escalate.
Israel has said that it had no choice but to attack. They say they'd gathered intelligence that Tehran was approaching what they call the point of no return in its pursuit of a nuclear weapon. Do you agree that they had no choice?
Well, I don't think anybody questions how destabilising Iran is being, of course. But what we would say is that this is escalating, not de-escalating the situation, and we would urge restraint, and that's what our Foreign Secretary, our Prime Minister, will be working to do.
So was Israel wrong to launch these strikes?
I don't think, I would say as a Foreign Office, not a Foreign Office Minister, things that perhaps the Foreign Secretary may or may not say in due course. What I would say from the government's perspective this morning in an emerging situation is we are doing everything we can to urge restraint and to try and de-escalate the situation. And I think that is the right approach. We need to be calm at this point, work with our allies, do what we can to stop escalation, because we do not believe escalation is going to be helpful in the region or the wider world, of course.
How great a risk do you consider Iran's nuclear program to be?
Well, of course, we know, we've all known for some time how destabilising Iran has been in their actions. I think in this moment now, which is a dangerous moment, we just have to focus on de-escalation, and that's what the government will be doing.
And the US was due to hold the next round of negotiations with Iran on attempts to find a nuclear deal just this weekend on Sunday. Do you expect those talks to go ahead?
I'm sure the Foreign Secretary will say more on these matters in due course. For now, the priority for us is to try and do what we can to de-escalate, and of course there'll be allies around the world who will be helping us do that.
And what about British workers, British citizens in the region? Is there any move to pull embassy workers, for example, out of the region? What steps are you taking there?
Well, the Foreign Secretary will be making those kinds of decisions as we speak. Of course, he's been dealing with, of course, the absolutely horrific crash in India as well, the Foreign Office in crisis mode, trying to support families there. He will now be looking at this emerging situation and making sure we keep people safe wherever we need to. Of course, that would be a priority for him and the government.
And Iran's supreme leader has said that Israel must await severe punishment. You talk about the need for de-escalation. So what would your message to Iran be as it considers its response?
Well, we want all parties to de-escalate, not escalate. The language that's being used there, you can see how dangerous a moment this is, and this government will be doing what it can.
And give us an idea of what that involves. When you say the government will do what it can to de-escalate, what room is there for diplomacy, and what role might the UK play in that?
Well, the UK has many allies around the world who will be wanting to do the same, to get that restraint, to get that de-escalation. How that operates, how that works, the Foreign Secretary will say more in due course.
I want to also just get your response to the devastating plane crash that occurred in India yesterday, which had such awful consequences. What is the latest you're hearing from India about the crash?
So the Prime Minister has offered his condolences to Prime Minister Modi. It's obviously an utterly devastating situation. Many families will be absolutely devastated. I'm an MP in Croydon. We have a large Indian community there, and I know that people are completely distraught. We have sent some air investigators to India to help with the investigation into what happened. The Foreign Office has, of course, a support line that people should ring. We will be there to offer all the support that we can to those families. We need to get to the bottom of what's happened. I don't think anyone is suggesting foul play, but it will take time to establish what went wrong. But of course, so many people have lost loved ones, and our thoughts are with them today.
Absolutely. And you mentioned those 4 British investigators on their way out to help authorities there. Give us an idea of other support that might be offered to India at this time.
Well, we'll offer whatever support we need. Of course, our immediate concern will be the families of loved ones from the UK, and how we support them, how we make sure they get all the support that they need. Of course, there will be a significant investigation into what happened, which will take some time, I suspect, to get to the bottom of, and we'll be there to support with people on the ground and people here in the UK too.
Well, Sarah Jones, another time we will talk about domestic policy, but I hope, as you understand, international events have rather overtaken us this morning. Thanks very much indeed for coming in and giving us your response. So let's get more then on our top story this morning. Israel has launched what it calls a preemptive strike on Iran's nuclear facilities and other military targets. Benjamin Netanyahu promised the mission, dubbed Operation Rising Lion, would continue for as many days as it takes, saying Iran's nuclear program poses a threat to Israel's very survival. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, vowed a harsh punishment in retaliation for the attack, saying Israel has brought a bitter and painful fate upon itself, and it will certainly face it. Well, the strikes, including on the capital Tehran, have killed the head of Iran's Revolutionary Guards, Major General Hossein Salami, according to Iranian state media. Israel's military says 200 fighter jets completed strikes on more than 100 targets, including nuclear facilities in different areas of Iran. Israel's military claims Iran is advancing a secret program to build nuclear weapons and says Tehran has the capacity to make a nuclear bomb within days. Well, Iran's supreme leader says residential areas in Tehran have been hit, while the International Atomic Watchdog has confirmed the Natanz nuclear site was also targeted in the attacks, while Iranian media is reporting 2 of Iran's top nuclear scientists were killed. So this is where strikes have been reported so far. In the capital, Tehran, where Iranian state media is reporting residential areas have been hit and civilian casualties are reported. Khorramabad in western Iran, which is home to a large missile base, and Iran's main uranium enrichment facility at Natanz, where the International Atomic Energy Agency is now closely monitoring radiation levels. And the Israeli military has confirmed that Iran has launched more than 100 drones towards Israel in the past few hours. Israel's military spokesperson has said the country is in for a rough few hours. Well, our Middle East correspondent Alistair Bunkle has the latest from Jerusalem.
They're targeting not just Iran's nuclear sites, but also their ballistic missile program, and as we know now, key leaders in the Iranian regime, the head, the commander of the Revolutionary Guard, the senior political advisor to the supreme leader, and potentially others. Multiple waves of Israeli strikes over the last few hours. More than 200 Israeli aircraft involved in the operation, we're told. They've struck more than 100 sites in and around Iran, the length and the breadth of the country. This is designed to, if not totally eliminate Iran's nuclear capabilities, at least to severely degrade it and push it back many, many years. But it is more than that. It is striking at Iran's wider military capabilities, its ability to be able to respond to Israel. And interestingly, in the last few minutes, we've heard that Iran has launched around 100 drones at Israel. Israel's working to shoot them down now. That would be Iran's first response, first retaliation as we know it. And it's not in the form of ballistic missiles, it's in the form of drones that can be lethal, but obviously travel much more slowly than ballistic missiles and don't carry the same payload as ballistic missiles. Maybe that points to the damage that Israel has managed to inflict on Iran's ability to respond to this. We know that in addition to the Israeli Air Force operating overnight, many reports around in Israeli media that the Mossad, Israel's famous intelligence agency that has had success in Iran before, they have also been working to eliminate ballistic missile sites and parts of Iran's nuclear capability. So a huge, wide-ranging attack on Iran, and just the beginning. We expect this to last many days. This is not a one and done, but it does look as though Israel is trying to make it once and for all.
So let's just bring you some breaking news on this story. The IDF has said in the last few moments that it's eliminated the three most senior military commanders of the Iranian regime. They've gone on to say that more than 200 Israeli Air Force fighter jets, guided, they say, by precise intelligence from the Intelligence Directorate, struck over 100 targets across Iran, something they've already announced. But they also say it included the hideouts of senior operatives in the Iranian military leadership. They say that the strikes eliminated those three most senior military commanders. They say that is the Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces of the Iranian regime, Mohammad Hossein Bagheri, Commander of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Hossein Salami, and Commander of Khatam al-Anbiya Emergency Command, Gholam Ali Rashid. Well, let's get a little bit of reaction. Deborah is back with us. So, Deborah, what do you make of these claims by the IDF?
Well, that's what I was referring to when we were speaking earlier. I mean, it's part of not just trying to prevent Iran from developing the nuclear weapons, but also degrading its actual military command and control. So the best way to attack, well, one of the ways to attack an armed force is to go after the leadership. And so the fact that they have managed in this one strike, this first initial onslaught, to take out the top three military commanders for Iran, that's a huge...
Are you guys able to get on ADS-B and flight radar?
You get more reaction now. I'm joined by Iranian Studies lecturer at Ragman University, Dr. Mir Javandanfar. Very good morning to you. Thanks so much for joining us. First of all, your reaction to Israel's strikes on Iran.
Well, this seems to be an operation with two main strategic goals, decapitation and dismemberment. Decapitation of Iran's military command and decapitation of Iran's nuclear program, the senior leadership and senior scientists, and also dismemberment of Iran's nuclear facilities and key military infrastructures. This is an operation that it is extremely unlikely to have been undertaken without coordination with President Trump, who is currently involved in the talks with the Iranian government over Iran's nuclear program. And I think there are various reasons why Israel undertook this extensive operation. One reason that really stood out to me and was new is the remark by Israel's Prime Minister, Mr. Benjamin Netanyahu, last night, in which he said, in recent months, I'm quoting him exactly, Iran has taken steps that it has never taken before, steps to weaponize its enriched uranium. And I think this is probably one of the biggest factors that pushed Israel, with America's agreement, to undertake this operation.
So let's look at the effect that those strikes might have. We've just had the news from the IDF. They're saying that they've eliminated the three most senior military commanders of the Iranian regime. What impact will that have on Iran and potentially on its ability to respond?
Well, it is extremely unlikely that the Iranians are not going to respond. This is expected. But I think this is going to severely disrupt the way the command and communication of senior leadership is carried out. And I think that would undermine the quality of the response. I think right now, as we speak, Iranian intelligence right now and senior Iranian military leadership is extremely concerned about deep penetration of Israeli intelligence inside Iran's military. So they would be concerned that whatever decision they undertake now, Israel is going to know about it. Because last night Israel was able to kill at least 5 senior members of Iran's military and nuclear leadership while they were sleeping in their beds in separate parts of Tehran. This is in addition to other senior Iranian nuclear scientists. So the fact that Israel, according to this operation, has access to such precise and real-time intelligence would make them hesitant in terms of making the right decision, because they would worry that whatever decision they make, Israel is not going to know about it beforehand. But in any case, the Iranians are going to respond. As your correspondent in Jerusalem said, they have fired 100 drones at Israel. But I think the biggest response that Israel would be looking out for is whether Iran is now going to make a nuclear bomb. Because this has always been one of the reasons why Israel has been hesitant to attack. We have to now wait and see whether Ayatollah Khamenei gives an order for Iran to leave the non-proliferation treaty.
They've already made a nuclear bomb, dude. Stop talking out of your ass. It was tested. It went off underground. Russian parts. We already know all that shit. They already made a bomb. So stop playing stupid.
And officially make a nuclear weapon.
And in the meantime, what damage do you think Israel will have done to Iran's nuclear facilities and abilities to develop its nuclear program?
To be quite honest, Anna, I think we have to wait and see. All we know now, until now, is that major sites have been attacked, but I don't have access to any informed sources in the media that tell me the extent of the damages. But I assume that Israel would have undertaken key measures in terms of planning such attacks so that they at least severely delay Iran's nuclear program, but we have to wait and see. What is interesting right now is that we are awaiting the arrival of 100 Iranian drones. It takes about 5 hours for them to get here. Some people might say, okay, it's 5 hours, it's a long time to get prepared. That's true, but the fact that they are so slow actually makes them more difficult to shoot down. So we are right now facing a major challenge in terms of large numbers of drones being fired at Israel, and we have to wait and see the response of the Israeli Defense Forces and most probably our American allies.
Well, Dr. Mir Javandamfar, we appreciate your time this morning and your response to the events overnight. Thanks very much indeed.
He really should watch KLW World News. He would have a much better idea.
And of course, we'll keep you up to date with all the developments on those Israeli strikes on Iran throughout the morning. But I just want to take you to one other main story this morning now. And aviation specialists will today begin to investigate what caused an Air India plane bound for London to crash shortly after takeoff. 241 passengers and crew were killed, and rescue workers are continuing to search for missing people. Well, miraculously, one man, a British national, survived. Experts will be hoping to find the plane's black boxes, which hold data about the flight, including altitude and speed, as well as recordings of the pilots. India's Prime Minister visited the crash site this morning and met some of the injured people being treated in hospital. Well, our India correspondent, Neville Lazarus, is in Ahmedabad for us now. Morning to you, Neville. So, India waking up still with that devastating news to comprehend. Tell us a little bit about this visit today.
Well, it was absolute shock and horror to see what happened yesterday. The Prime Minister came to this civil hospital, one of the biggest hospitals in Ahmedabad, and he visited, before that, he visited the crash site, walking through a lot of the debris of that crash, and also into those buildings, those block of flats, which housed a number of medical students who belonged to, who were interning and belonged to this hospital. He then came here and met some of the survivors, including a number of students, but also met with Ramesh, the British national, who was the lone survivor, who sort of almost walked out unscathed. Last night I did manage to meet him in his ward. Access was very, very tight, but we did have at least 20-25 seconds of a meeting with him. I introduced myself. I asked him how he is. He did say he's okay. He nodded. He acknowledged. And then I was soon ushered out by plainclothes policemen and some of the hospital staff. But he looked fine. He was half sitting on his bed. He had bruises on his hands, a few on his face, and he was conscious. He was acknowledging. He was talking to others, to some of the attendants, and acknowledged my presence. And when I spoke with him, I even spoke to the first doctor, Dr. Sharik, who sort of treated him when he when he came to the hospital. He was brought by the ambulance. He said he had a slight limp while walking, but he looked fine. They did internal checks. He was okay. The only thing he said, he is undergoing a lot of mental trauma, and that you could very well imagine it, looking at the kind of social media pictures of this plane crash when it plummeted into the ground, erupting into a fireball. Here, there are still DNA samples being taken of families out here, so that then they will give the bodies back to them, because some, a doctor was saying, are burnt and charred beyond recognition. But a real shock and horror for one of the worst aviation disasters this country has had.
Indeed. Neville, thanks very much indeed. Well, details of the 52 British nationals killed in the crash are beginning to emerge. And of course, we're learning more about the one passenger who survived. Our correspondent, Oliver Whitfield-Mirchich, is at Gatwick Airport this morning. And Oliver, so many families affected by this tragedy. Tell us a little bit more about what's being done to support them.
So here at the airport, there has been an emergency centre being set up by Air India and by Gatwick Airport to help try and get some of those families to India, where of course they're going to have to go through the formal identification process and to do the formal repatriation of those bodies back to the UK. And we're starting to learn some of those names of the 52 Brits who've died in this tragedy, including the Nanabava family. That included Akhil Nanabava, his wife Hannah, and their 4-year-old daughter Sarah, with the news of their deaths confirmed by the Gloucester Muslim Community Group, which said that they were profoundly heartbroken by the devastating loss of life. Now, Sarah's headmaster has actually paid tribute to the family, saying they were known for their generosity and for their fundraising effort. He believes this was a last-minute trip to India for the trio. Also amongst the dead is the British couple Jamie and Feeble Greenlaw Meek. Now, they ran spiritual wellness centres here in Kent and in London, and they had gone to India for a restful break. In the days before their flight, they'd said that they'd had a magical time in videos posted to social media just before that flight had taken off. They had also posted a video in which they could be seen teasing each other. They also said that they were coming back to the UK wonderfully calm and relaxed. And then, of course, there is that miraculous survivor in the emergency exit row of economy class, 40-year-old Vishwash Kumar Ramesh from Leicestershire. His family had received a call from Vishwash just before the flight had taken off, saying that he was ready to depart. And then a few minutes later, another call saying that he did not know how he had survived the fireball that had erupted after that flight had crashed into the residential area in Ahmedabad. Indeed, he didn't know how he had gotten off the plane. But this is a bittersweet moment for the family, because Vishwash was actually travelling with his brother Nayan. And so while they have had a miracle in the fact that Vishwash has survived, it is tinged with sadness and with loss, because they know that only one of the brothers will eventually return to the UK. But here at Gatwick Airport, flights are continuing to take off. Gatwick Airport is working in conjunction with Air India and with the Indian High Commission, with helplines set up for families and for people who've been affected by this tragedy.
Oliver, thanks very much indeed. Well, as we were just hearing, the cause of the crash is unknown, and investigators are still looking for the plane's second black box after one was reportedly recovered from the wreckage. Well, let's talk to Mitch Fox now, who's the director of the Asia-Pacific Centre for Aviation Safety at the Flight Safety Foundation. Very good morning to you. Thanks so much for talking to us. So the cause of the crash not yet established, but give us an idea about how the investigation is likely to be carried out to try to find out what happened.
Good morning. Thank you for having me on your show. On behalf of the Flight Safety Foundation, first, I'd like to express our heartfelt condolences and our thoughts to all of the families of the victims in this tragic accident. So let me start from what we know and then where we expect things to go from here. So we know that Air India 171 departed from Ahmedabad bound for London Gatwick yesterday. We know there were 230 passengers and 12 crew members, and as you just reported, there was an extraordinary survival of one of the passengers. After the takeoff, the airplane reached an altitude of approximately 625 feet and then began a descent until it crashed into the ground. The airplane was a Boeing 787-8. The 787 has an excellent safety record. And in fact, this is the first fatal accident of a Boeing 787 since it was introduced in 2011. Now, there's a lot of speculation going on concerning the potential causes of the accident. Of course, this is understandable. People want to get to an answer fairly quickly, but it is too early to speculate on the causes. So right now, as you can see, and your reporter reported on, the site has to be secured. This is a recovery effort now. Before the accident, investigators can actually get in and start to do their job. At this point, we really don't know what the cause of the accident is, and that determination will require a thorough investigation. And as you mentioned, the flight data recorders, the digital flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder are absolutely essential to get to some answers and causes for this accident. I do want to emphasize at this point, this occurred on takeoff, and I want to mention that pilots are trained continuously for engine failures and other malfunctions that could occur on takeoff. Now, as we go into this investigation, the actual process and responsibilities for an accident investigation are laid forward in international standards that are put together by the International Civil Aviation Organization. It's a specialized agency of the United Nations. Those standards put forth which authorities are responsible for the investigation. And in this case, the state of occurrence, India, is the responsible party for the investigation. In India, it's the India Accident Investigation Bureau, or AAIB, that will lead the investigation, and the AAIB has already initiated the formal investigation. As I mentioned, it's vitally important to retrieve both the flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder, the so-called black boxes. We've yet to confirm whether or not either one of those recorders have been retrieved. But once they are retrieved, it is an important source of information. So, for example, the flight data recorder on a modern state-of-the-art airliner such as the Boeing 787 records thousands of parameters of information that will be analyzed to help to determine the causal factors that led up to the accident.
Okay.
Finally, I would like to emphasize this is an international effort. And as a part of those international standards, the country that built and designed the airplane is allowed to participate and assist in the investigation. So I'm aware that a team from the United States is probably already en route, and we just heard from one of your reports that a team from the United Kingdom is en route. This is an important part of the investigation. No single accident affects a single country. It's an international event.
Okay, we must leave it there, but we appreciate your analysis. Mitch Fox, thanks very much indeed for your time this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
We're going to go back now to our top story this morning. Israel has launched what it calls a preemptive strike on Iran's nuclear facilities as well as other military targets. Benjamin Netanyahu promised the mission, dubbed Operation Rising Lion, would continue for as many days as it takes, saying Iran's nuclear program poses a threat to Israel's very survival. Israel's military says 200 fighter jets completed strikes on more than 100 targets, including nuclear facilities in different areas of Iran. Israel's military claims that Iran is advancing a secret program to build nuclear weapons and says Tehran has the capacity to make a nuclear bomb within days. Well, let's get some reaction. I'm joined by Nick Ritchie from the Department of Politics and International Relations at the University of York. Good morning to you. What do you make of these strikes by Israel on Iran? A number of sites targeted, including nuclear facilities.
Good morning, Anna. Yes, it's not altogether unexpected. There's been some build-up that Israel was likely to attack Iran and suggested that it would do so just a couple of days ago. So it's not entirely unexpected, but it is fairly unprecedented. Israel did launch its first attack on Iran back in October last year, but this is a more significant attack, more specifically targeting Iran's nuclear program, particularly its uranium enrichment program. And we can expect to see, as I think we are at the moment, expect to see retaliation from Iran.
Well, yes, and Iran has always claimed that its nuclear program is for civilian purposes only. Benjamin Netanyahu, though, has made a statement last night saying that Iran has recently taken steps to weaponize enriched uranium and said if not stopped, it could produce a nuclear weapon in a very short time. What do we know about Iran's nuclear program?
We know that Iran has invested very heavily in developing uranium enrichment technology, and uranium can be enriched up to different levels in a particular isotope. Usually it's enriched up to 5 to 6% in order to be used as nuclear fuel in a power reactor. For use in a nuclear weapon, it needs to be enriched up to 90% plus, using the same technology. The agreement that was reached in 2015 between the Obama administration, European partners, and Iran limited that level of enrichment to 3.67%. The Trump administration in 2018 withdrew from that commitment. European partners tried to encourage Iran to stay within that agreement, but Iran eventually decided to withdraw and has since started to enrich uranium up to a level of about 60%. And from there, it would take maybe a matter of weeks or months to enrich that quantity of material from 60% up to 90% that can then be used in a nuclear weapon. There would still be much more work to do to actually use that material in a weapon that could be delivered securely from the perspective of the Iranian authorities onto a target. But that's the primary concern of the international community and of Israel. Not forgetting, of course, that Israel itself has a nuclear arsenal and has had so for many decades.
OK, well, Dr. Nick Ritchie, we appreciate your time this morning. Apologies we didn't have longer to chat to you, but we really appreciate your analysis. Do stay with us. We've got lots more on this story as Israel has conducted strikes on Iranian targets, including nuclear facilities. The Israeli military has said that they've eliminated 3 of the most senior military commanders of the Iranian regime as well. We'll have all the details coming up next. Don't go away.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional. This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party. I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
Hello, good morning. You're watching Sky News. It's 8 o'clock. Israel launches airstrikes on Iran against military and nuclear targets.
Israel launched Operation Rising Lion, a targeted military operation to roll back the Iranian threat to Israel's very survival.
The IDF claims it's killed Iran's most senior military commanders. Iran's supreme leader vows severe punishment for the attack and says Israel has brought a painful fate upon itself.
Well, good morning from Jerusalem. Israelis were woken in the middle of the night by air raid sirens and emergency alerts on their phones. Millions have spent the night sheltering in bunkers and air raid shelters as we now await Iran's response.
And here, Sir Keir Starmer urges restraint and a return to diplomacy, saying escalation serves no one in the region. Hello, a very good morning. Thanks for joining us. Our breaking news today, Israel has launched what it calls a preemptive strike on Iran's nuclear facilities and other military targets. Benjamin Netanyahu promised the mission, dubbed Operation Rising Lion, would continue for as many days as it takes, saying Iran's nuclear program poses a threat to Israel's very survival. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, vowed a harsh punishment in retaliation for the attack, saying Israel has brought a bitter and painful fate upon itself, and it will certainly face it. Well, the strikes, including on the capital Tehran, have killed the head of Iran's Revolutionary Guards, Major General Hossein Salami, according to Iranian state media. Israel's military says 200 fighter jets completed strikes on more than 100 targets, including nuclear facilities in different areas of Iran. Israel's military claims Iran is advancing a secret program to build nuclear weapons and says Tehran has the capacity to make a nuclear bomb within days. Iran's supreme leader says residential areas in Tehran have been hit, while the international atomic watchdog has confirmed the Natanz nuclear site was also targeted in the attacks, while Iranian media is reporting 2 of Iran's top nuclear scientists were killed. Well, this is where strikes have been reported so far. In the capital, Tehran, where Iranian state media is reporting residential areas have been hit and civilian casualties are reported. Khorramabad in western Iran, which is home to a large missile base, and Iran's main uranium enrichment facility at Natanz, where the International Atomic Energy Agency is now closely monitoring radiation levels. Well, Israeli military has confirmed Iran has launched more than 100 drones towards Israel in the past few hours. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says it launched the strike because Iran's nuclear program poses a threat to the country's very survival.
Israel launched Operation Rising Lion, a targeted military operation to roll back the Iranian threat to Israel's very survival. This operation will continue for as many days as it takes to remove this threat. For decades, the tyrants of Tehran have brazenly, openly called for Israel's destruction. They've backed up their genocidal rhetoric with a program to develop nuclear weapons. In recent years, Iran has produced enough highly enriched uranium for 9 atom bombs. 9. In recent months, Iran has taken steps that it has never taken before, steps to weaponize this enriched uranium. And if not stopped, Iran could produce a nuclear weapon in a very short time. It could be a year, it could be within a few months, less than a year. This is a clear and present danger to Israel's very survival.
Well, let's take you live to Jerusalem and our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle. Alistair, Benjamin Netanyahu has called it a decisive moment in Israel's history. Just how significant would you say these strikes have been?
I think they are very significant. They are targeting Iran's nuclear facilities. They've been targeting other aspects of Iran's military, like its ballistic missile capabilities. And perhaps most significantly of all, targeting some of the key figures within the Iranian regime, eliminating, we're told, the head of the Revolutionary Guard, the head of the Iranian military, the head of Iran's emergency unit. All these figures very close to the man at the top, to Iran's supreme leader. So they have been and are continuing to be extensive strikes, multiple waves, and this will continue, we're told, over a number of days. What we're waiting for now is Iran's response. We understand they've launched 100 drones at Israel. They are now being engaged by the Israeli military and possibly others as they are en route to Israel. Israel now has pretty good freedom of movement over the skies around a lot of the Middle East. They can fly pretty much without impunity across Lebanon, across Syria, possibly even across Iran if they have sufficiently eliminated Iran's air defenses. So they are working now to bring down those drones as they make their way here and to try and eliminate them before they enter Israeli airspace. I suppose the question is, are those drones just kind of the first wave of an Iranian retaliation designed to kind of suck up Israel's defenses, and will they follow up with a barrage of ballistic missiles?
Well, yes, and what next from Israel too, who said this could go on for days?
That is what we're being briefed. This is not a one and done. This will go on for many days. I think a lot will depend on Iran's air defenses and whether or not Israel has, as I say, pretty much freedom of movement to operate in the skies above Iran. It looks as though they potentially do, which will give them the ability to carry on waves of airstrikes and gradually degrade Iran's military capabilities. I think it might depend on international diplomacy, although right now that is going to be pretty ineffectual, I imagine. And it will depend, of course, on what Iran does in response. If Iran is able to respond in a meaningful way and in a sustained way, then this will, one assumes, turn into a war. If Iran finds it's unable to respond to Israel, then I think we'll find waves of Israeli attacks over Iran over a number of days.
OK, well, we will watch for any future developments, of course, Alistair, and I know you'll keep us up to date. For the moment, thanks very much indeed. Well, the US has denied any military involvement in the attacks. Our correspondent David Blevins has more on this from LA.
Well, the response so far has been fairly measured. Secretary of State Marco Rubio describing the strikes on Iran as unilateral, so keen to emphasize that this was Israel's decision and Israel's alone. But of course, there are potential implications, especially for US personnel in that region. They are right now the #1 priority for the Trump administration. We know that the White House was advised in advance of the strikes. The president's national security team watched them in real time from the Situation Room at the White House, and they have already begun to evacuate non-essential personnel from their embassy in Baghdad and to restrict the movements of other US personnel in Israel, for example. And Marco Rubio has sent a very clear message to Iran: do not strike US targets. That's because they're aware of the risk now posed. The president didn't want this. Many people were skeptical when he authorized engagement with Iran in relation to its nuclear capability. But Donald Trump has always believed those talks could prove fruitful. He didn't want strikes at this time. We're told there was a very heated telephone exchange between him and Benjamin Netanyahu last Monday. Now, Netanyahu values his relationship with Trump, but ultimately the timing of these strikes has been on Israel's terms. And the big question right now, I suppose, is will the strikes push Iran towards agreement with the United States in relation to its nuclear capability, or have these strikes dashed any hope of that completely?
Well, Iran's semi-official Tasnim news agency has released a statement attributed to the country's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. It reads, "This regime must await severe punishment. By God's will, the powerful arm of the Islamic Republic's armed forces will not let it go unpunished. In the enemy's attacks, a number of commanders and scientists were martyred. Their successors and colleagues will immediately continue their duties, God willing." With this crime, the Zionist regime has brought a bitter and painful fate upon itself, and it will certainly face it. So let's get a little bit more now on the reaction here in the UK. As you can see, Amanda is here with me. And we have heard from the government this morning, haven't we? What are they saying about these attacks overnight?
Yes, so the message is very consistent, really, from various figures across UK government. De-escalation, calm, diplomacy, I would say, are the key words there. Let me read you a little bit from Sir Keir Starmer's statement. He says, the reports of these strikes are concerning. We urge all parties to step back and reduce tensions urgently. Escalation serves no one in the region. Stability in the Middle East must be the priority. We are engaging partners to de-escalate. Now is the time for restraint, calm and a return to diplomacy. So I think the message there is very much that the UK is reaching out to its allies in diplomatic efforts. I think it's interesting that the message is to all parties. This is very much a message to Israel and Iran. It's not just a message being critical of the Iranian nuclear situation here. David Lammy echoing very similar message in his statement, the Foreign Secretary. He says, stability in the Middle East is vital for global security. I'm concerned to see reports of strikes overnight. Further escalation is a serious threat to peace and stability in the region and in no one's interest. This is a dangerous moment, and I urge all parties to show restraint. I think what's quite interesting here is that previously, when we've had those attacks last year where Iran attacked Israel, Israel retaliated and so on, we very much heard the UK government repeatedly making the case that Israel has a right to self-defence. Now, of course, this is quite a very different situation, but we're not really hearing that expression of solidarity with Israel. As we've heard previously, of course, UK-Israeli relations are at a delicate place with sanctions of ministers over the situation in Gaza, and clearly that is something potentially being reflected here. Now, more broadly, we know that there is a question of whether the UK could have been involved. The US said they're not, and this is something the UK government also denying. You asked Sarah Jones about this earlier. I think we can hear a bit what she had to say.
Did the British government have prior knowledge of the strikes?
We weren't involved in the strikes. Obviously, I can't talk about information about what we did or didn't know. That wouldn't be appropriate. But the priority now, I know, for the Foreign Secretary, who will be leading on this, working closely, of course, with the Prime Minister, is to work with our allies to urge restraint and to de-escalate.
Is that previously UK military warplanes have perhaps been involved in the defence, or at least on standby in the defence of Israel and Iranian retaliation. We understand, Deborah Haynes, our defence editor, understands that that's not the case this time. As much as we know, of course, it's very much a developing situation. We also don't believe there's been any move to evacuate any UK personnel in the region, as we've seen happening with US embassies. Earlier on this week, although the Foreign Office advice is very much to everyone out there to take note of what they're advising and monitor that situation carefully. Now, more broadly in terms of Iran, when you asked Sarah Jones about this earlier, she said, well, we've known for some time now the destabilising impact the Iranian nuclear program is having. And the Prime Minister's spokesperson yesterday talked about the fact that their nuclear program is more advanced than ever, and it is a threat to international peace and security. And I think that clearly is the UK position. More broadly, of course, the UK was involved in that 2015 deal to try and restrict the Iranian nuclear program in return for sanctions being lifted, along with the US, Russia, Germany, France and China, which of course the US then pulled out of. But I think the UK position is very much sees Iran as a threat, is very critical of the expansion of the nuclear program, very concerned about the fact that of that notice that Iran in breach of its obligations as well. So clearly this is something the UK government is very concerned about, but in terms of getting involved directly at the moment, it's very much a message of diplomacy and de-escalation.
OK, yeah, interesting to see if we hear anything more from the Foreign Secretary later in the day. Thanks very much indeed, Amanda. Thank you. Well, Israel's President Isaac Herzog has released a statement on X saying the attack was a targeted operation to neutralise an immediate and existential threat. He goes on to say the international community has seen how over the last decades the Iranian regime at the helm of a global terror empire has continued to radicalise and destabilise the region with its proxies while working relentlessly to advance its military nuclear capabilities and expand its ballistic missile arsenal. Iran's leaders have made no secret of their openly repeated intention to annihilate the state of Israel. Israel has the inherent right and the solemn duty to defend itself and will always do so with determination and clarity. Well, let's bring in our Security and Defence Editor, Deborah Haynes, now. So, Deborah, what details do we have of what targets have been struck?
Well, from what the Israelis are saying in terms of their operation so far, they've gone after key nuclear sites, including the Natanz, one of the biggest nuclear facilities where there's nuclear fuel, clearly a key target if you're aiming to degrade Iran's ability to build a bomb. But there's no indication yet whether they've also gone after Fordo, which is the most comprehensive facility for Iran's nuclear capabilities. It's buried deep under a mountain and would require bunker-busting bombs to hit. And it's the kind of weapon that really many analysts believe only the Americans have. And the talk I've been getting from analysts I've been speaking to is that for Israel comprehensively to set back Iran's nuclear program, they wouldn't be able to do it alone, even now, and that actually it waits to be seen, and obviously this is day one of the operation, by how much they are able to set the program back. There is a concern that actually this strike might just accelerate the Iranian intent to develop their nuclear facilities. Of course, Iran has always denied ever wanting to build a bomb. As well as that, the Israelis have gone after key military leadership, as you've been hearing from Alistair Bunkle, killing the top 3 commanders of the Iranian armed forces, and that is going to be a massive impact on Iran's ability to command and control and come up with its response. And obviously we're waiting to see the retaliation. Everybody expects Iran to fight back. How effective Israel's campaign over the last year or so at degrading Iran's air defences and other military capabilities. They've been striking into Iran on a number of occasions already. By how much that will erode Iran's ability to fight back, that will be something to watch. Also, allies. Are allies going to be helping? When Iran last struck Israel, the United States was alongside. The British, the RAF, they also helped in the first wave of strikes and were airborne in the second wave of strikes. I understand at the moment British warplanes are not airborne to defend Israel's skies. That could, of course, change. The RAF has a key base in Cyprus, RAF Akrotiri. Will the Americans maybe put pressure on the British to allow that base to be used to facilitate aircraft, other military assets involved in any operation to defend Israel's skies? Will the British be asked directly to help? Of course, the UK has limited capabilities, but it has capabilities, and for Israel to be seen to have allies, that's also an important signal. Really interesting, important questions. You can expect, one final thing, I imagine, to see reinforcements of some kind being sent by the UK to Cyprus to help bolster defences there. Clearly, it's also in range of Iranian missiles, should Iran be looking to strike not just at Israel, but at other allies in the area.
A lot to watch, as you say, some important questions to be answered. Deborah, thanks very much indeed. Well, earlier we heard from nuclear expert Professor Matthew Bunn, who said this attack may motivate Iran to produce nuclear arms.
This will make Iran even more determined that it needs to move directly toward producing nuclear weapons. My guess is that it will try to rebuild its program at secret locations. And if I were betting, I think, unfortunately, that the odds of Iran actually having a nuclear bomb in hand 10 years from now are probably higher as a result of this strike rather than lower. I think Iran will be more determined. They'll probably kick out inspectors. They may pull out of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and then proceed at secret sites.
Well, let's get the view of the opposition now. Shadow Paymaster General Richard Holden is here with me. Very good morning to you.
Good morning to you too.
First of all, your reaction to Israel's strike on Iran overnight.
Well, look, I think we all want to see a peace in the Middle East. We know that was... there have been huge moves towards that over the last few years, with Israel making peace treaties with some of those long-standing Arab states. That was shattered when Israel was attacked in October in 2020, a couple of years ago, on October the 7th. And in doing so, that also shattered what was peace talks between Israel and some of its long-standing opponents in the region, where it had made major progress. And a lot of that came from, that shattering of that came through Iranian proxies in the region, like Hamas, attacking, but also proxies like Hezbollah as well. Overnight, what we've seen is obviously concerning because it could lead to a broader escalation for the region. What I want to see is stability restored, to see peace restored as quickly as possible, because I want to see us move towards a two-state solution for Israel, Palestine, and also Israel normalising relations with its neighbours. That is obviously going to be very difficult when at the moment you've got certain regimes, like the Iranian regime, who wish to see Israel cease to exist as a country. I think we need to see actually a move towards mutual acknowledgement and to try and de-escalate the situation in the Middle East, because I don't think it will serve anyone if we end up in further conflict.
Well, yes, I mean, Israel said it had no choice but to attack. Do you think it did have a choice then?
Well, look, I think everybody's always got a choice on exactly what they do and when, and it's, I don't have all the intelligence. I'm not a government minister anymore, so I don't know the full ins and outs of it. I do understand that Israel feels itself under constant pressure from regimes which say that they want to wipe it off the face of the earth, which is what the Iranian regime wants to do as well. That's not where the Israeli government is. They want to, that's not their view of Iran. They want to, I think, in the long term, have a peaceful existence with the people of Iran. But it's very difficult when you've got regimes in some of these countries who are not interested in that. I think it's about what we should be doing as much as possible is working to provide stability and try and bring people together. We've seen some of those peace talks with the Americans recently in the region as well. I want to see us doing more of that and lending support to that wherever possible.
Iran has always maintained that its nuclear program is for civilian purposes only. How concerned are you about that program, though?
I don't think anybody realistically believes that's the case at the moment. I think we've got to have a situation where we're realistic about what's actually happening in the region, and I think there's a lot of things that you need to take with more than just a little pinch of salt. It's quite clear, Iran has also said it doesn't fund proxies in the region as well, which is also clearly untrue. What I think we want to see right across the board, though, is moving towards stability, calmness, de-escalation of the situation, because only via doing that can we move towards, which I think is in Israel's interest and everybody else's interest, certainly the people of the region, is to a peaceful Middle East.
We've been getting a similar message from the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary this morning, the need to de-escalate. What role can the UK play now in some kind of diplomacy that might take the heat out of the situation?
Well, I think the UK and actually our major allies can have a big role in that. We've got very good relationships with a lot of the Gulf states. We've got a very good working relationship with Israel, certainly have traditionally. I was out there myself a few months ago, earlier this year. I think we do have a role that we can play within that broader situation. We want to see that movement towards peace, but that cannot be a temporary peace. We can't just be looking for something which is short-term. We need to see that long-term solution, which is why we can't have a situation where, for example, we'd allow Hamas to be a regime, a terror regime, which has committed so many atrocities already, not just against the Israeli people, but also against their own people in Gaza as well. We cannot see a solution in which they're part of the government in Gaza or in the broader region as well. So I think we've got to be realistic about this, and we've got to be hard-headed about it, but we've got to also play our role wherever we can in moving towards that, to promote stability and peace, and that two-state solution for Israel and Palestine, but also enabling, wherever possible, some of those broader long-term relationships actually to develop as well.
I just want to get your thoughts, finally, on the devastating air crash that occurred in India yesterday. So many families there affected, families too here in Britain. Just wondering what you'd like to see the government do to support those people affected.
Well, obviously, absolutely anything that we can do. And I think we should also be, if there's expertise that we can help provide to the Indian authorities as well, I'm sure they've got some superb people themselves, but if there's anything we can help provide in that space, we should do. I mean, your heart obviously goes out to anybody who's affected by this. I've got British Indian constituents myself in Basildon and Billericay, and I know that some of them have been anxious about thinking about, are their family on these planes, on the plane, and they've obviously been very worried over the last few days as well. I think whenever tragedies like this happen, I think we can all think, there but for the grace of God goes me or my family, and so obviously our heart goes out to them, and I'm sure the government will be doing whatever it can to provide that support, both consular but also in that broader context to the Indian government.
OK, well, Richard Holden, Shadow Paymaster General, we appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed.
Cheers.
Thank you. So let's just recap our top story for you this morning if you're just joining us. Israel has launched what it calls a preemptive strike on Iran's nuclear facilities and other military targets. Benjamin Netanyahu promised the mission, dubbed Operation Rising Lion, would continue for as many days as it takes, saying Iran's nuclear program poses a threat to Israel's very survival. Well, Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, vowed a harsh punishment in retaliation for the attack, saying Israel has brought a bitter and painful fate upon itself, and it will certainly face it. The strikes, including on the capital Tehran, have killed the head of Iran's Revolutionary Guards, Major General Hossein Salami, according to Iranian state media. Well, Israel's military says 200 fighter jets completed strikes on more than 100 targets, including nuclear facilities in different areas of Iran. Israel's military claims Iran is advancing a secret program to build nuclear weapons and says Tehran has the capacity to make a nuclear bomb within days. Well, Iran's supreme leader says residential areas in Tehran have been hit, while the International Atomic Watchdog has confirmed the Natanz nuclear site was also targeted in the attacks, while Iranian media is reporting 2 of Iran's top nuclear scientists were killed. And this is where strikes have been reported so far. In the capital, Tehran, where Iranian state media is reporting residential areas have been hit and civilian casualties are reported. Khorramabad in western Iran, which is home to a large missile base, and Iran's main uranium enrichment facility at Natanz, where the International Atomic Energy Agency is now closely monitoring radiation levels. And the Israeli military has confirmed Iran has launched more than 100 drones towards Israel, with its spokesperson saying the country is in for a rough few hours. Well, earlier we heard from Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. He explained which sites Israel had targeted.
We struck at the heart of Iran's nuclear enrichment program. We struck at the heart of Iran's nuclear weaponization program. We targeted Iran's main enrichment facility in Natanz. We targeted Iran's leading nuclear scientists working on the Iranian bomb. We also struck at the heart of Iran's ballistic missile program. Last year, Iran fired 300 ballistic missiles at Israel. Each of these missiles carries a ton of explosives and threatens the lives of hundreds of people. Soon, those missiles could carry a nuclear payload, threatening the lives not of hundreds, but of millions. Iran is gearing up to produce 10,000 of those ballistic missiles within 3 years. Now just imagine 10,000 tons of TNT landing on a country the size of New Jersey. This is an intolerable threat. It too must be stopped.
Well, our Middle East correspondent Alistair Bunkle has the latest from Jerusalem.
They're targeting not just Iran's nuclear sites, but also their ballistic missile program, and as we know now, key leaders in the Iranian regime, the head, the commander of the Revolutionary Guard, the senior political advisor to the supreme leader, and potentially others. Multiple waves of Israeli strikes over the last few hours. More than 200 Israeli aircraft involved in the operation, we're told. They've struck more than 100 sites in and around Iran, the length and the breadth of the country. This is designed to, if not totally eliminate Iran's nuclear capabilities, at least to severely degrade it and push it back many, many years. But it is more than that. It is striking at Iran's wider military capabilities, its ability to be able to respond to Israel. And interestingly, In the last few minutes, we've heard that Iran has launched around 100 drones at Israel. Israel's working to shoot them down now. That would be Iran's first response, first retaliation as we know it. And it's not in the form of ballistic missiles, it's in the form of drones that can be lethal, but obviously travel much more slowly than ballistic missiles and don't carry the same payload as ballistic missiles. Maybe that points to the damage that Israel has managed to inflict on Iran's ability to respond to this. We know that in addition to the Israeli Air Force operating overnight, many reports around in Israeli media that the Mossad, Israel's famous intelligence agency that has had success in Iran before, they have also been working to eliminate ballistic missile sites and parts of Iran's nuclear capability. So a huge, wide-ranging attack on Iran, and just the beginning. We expect this to last many days. This is not a one and done, but it does look as though Israel is trying to make it once and for all.
Well, let's get more reaction now. So Simon Gass is a former British ambassador to Iran and joins us now. A very good morning to you. Were you surprised hearing about these strikes by Israel on Iran and the scale of them?
Well, I think we've known for some time that Israel was preparing possible strikes against Iran. It was showing signs of impatience with the US-Iran negotiating track on the nuclear issue. I think the question in people's minds was whether Israel could be restrained until those US-Iranian negotiations were complete and it had either led to success or had failed. The fact that Israel has not waited until that process was completed, I think that's the interesting part of this.
Well, yes, and what do you read into it? I mean, Israel says that they had no choice. They say that Iran was close to the point of no return, they say, in their pursuit of a nuclear weapon. Do you put the timing down to that?
Well, I think it's partly because that may be Israel's view, although it's worth remembering that the US intelligence community has been briefing out pretty widely in recent days that it does not think that at present Iran has a program to build a nuclear weapon. What it is doing is pushing ahead with various capabilities that would be useful were it to take such a decision. So that sense of urgency is not necessarily shared by everybody. I think another factor, though, was the sense that last October, when there was an exchange of strikes between Iran and Israel, Israel had degraded Iran's air defense system to a significant degree, and therefore felt that Iran was in a weaker position today, which might be remedied over time. And of course, that Iran has undoubtedly been weakened by the loss of some of its closest partners in the Middle East. Lebanese Hezbollah, of course, was pretty heavily decapitated by Israel last year. The Assad regime in Syria was swept away by internal action, and therefore part of Israel's calculation will have been that Iran is in a weaker position to respond today than it would have been in the past and might be again in the future.
Do you agree that it is in a weaker position? What do you expect in terms of response from Iran?
Well, I think it is undoubtedly in a weaker position, in as much as in past years when I've been dealing with such subjects, one of the concerns has been that if Israel came to blows with Iran, then Lebanese Hezbollah would have the ability to launch massive missile strikes from Lebanon at much shorter range than Iran can do from its own territory. And that is no longer such a risk today. So I think that that is certainly true. That does not mean that Iran has no means of retaliation at its hands. As your correspondent was saying, Iran has developed pretty sophisticated military drones, and we know from US briefings has been upping its production of ballistic missiles in recent months, and therefore it certainly has an ability to reply. Indeed, the US negotiator, Steve Witkoff, warned legislators in the United States just a few days ago that if Iran responded to an Israeli attack, that could lead to mass casualties. So the potential is certainly there for Iran to respond to this in a very strong way. Now, how strong it will choose to go, I think, is difficult. It will certainly respond stiffly. What it wants to avoid, on the other hand, is dragging the United States into the conflict, and that will require careful judgment on all sides.
Well, yes, and what do you make of the US response? We've heard from the US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, saying that the US was not involved in these strikes. I mean, what do you expect the administration to have known about these strikes, and what will their view be of them?
Well, I think the US administration will certainly continue to shout as loudly as it can that it wasn't, that they weren't involved in this process, because they do not want United States bases in the Middle East to become targets for Iranian retaliation. So that much is clear. I don't doubt, though, that the United States did have a substantial amount of information about Israeli intentions in the last few days. We have seen only a couple of days ago the US drawing down some of its staff in its quite vulnerable embassy in Baghdad, where there are militia groups aligned with Iran, and also trying to encourage dependents at US military bases in the Gulf to go on leave. So I'm in no doubt that the US had foreknowledge. How much foreknowledge they had, we don't know, nor do we know, and I think this is quite important, whether the United States tried to dissuade Israel from this action. It's just worth remembering that only a couple of days ago, Oman announced that the 6th round of US-Iranian negotiations on the nuclear issue were due to take place on Sunday in Muscat. Now, I would be astonished if that was still on. That's clearly going to go. But it does suggest that the United States still thought that there was some mileage in trying to negotiate a peaceful outcome to the nuclear issue.
What do you think will happen next? How is this going to play out in the weeks ahead?
Now, I think, as your correspondent said, this isn't over. We are going to see further strikes in both directions to continue what Israel has started. We don't yet have what one would call a battle damage assessment to know how effective Israeli strikes have been. We know that they have killed at least 3 of the top Iranian military commanders. We know that they have killed some nuclear scientists. They have struck nuclear installations and ballistic missile installations. But until we know how deep that damage has gone, it's difficult to predict how long this will go on for. We must also expect, as we've just discussed, Anna, the Iranian response to it. One of the things which the Iranian regime always fears is that it looks weak. Because they believe that if they look weak, that weakness will be exploited by Iran's enemies. So they will have to respond quite stiffly. The scale of that response, we don't yet know. So I think this will go on for a number of days. We also have to watch to see whether a risk of expansion of the conflict takes place. If, for example, Iran were to take action in the Persian Gulf to disrupt oil supplies through the Strait of Hormuz, that would be the sort of thing which would cause further alarm. I think that is probably against the odds for now, but really we're in uncharted territory, so I don't think any of us can make really confident predictions.
OK, well, Sir Simon Gass, really interesting to get your take and your response to this news overnight. We really appreciate your time. Thanks very much indeed. And just in the last few moments, we've heard from the Secretary-General of NATO, Mark Rutte. This is what he had to say.
Yeah, first a question for both of you, and that is, how can the international community work to bring this back to the negotiation table, the situation in the Middle East? And can you estimate the chances of that happening? And then I have a question for the Secretary General. And that is 5% is what the US President Donald Trump has been talking about. If you decide on 5% in The Hague, will that satisfy Donald Trump and protect the transatlantic link? And what will happen if many countries doesn't reach the goal?
On your first question, as I said, the situation is rapidly evolving. Of course, this all started last night. And I know that allies are really navigating this crisis, and everybody is focused on de-escalation. But, of course, all the next steps will follow from that. So it's difficult now to predict exactly what will happen over the next 24 and 48 hours. But I think there is a focused endeavor to make sure that de-escalation is the key to all the efforts. On your second question, when I got this role, and particularly when Donald Trump was elected as the 47th American president, many people asked me, is the US still committed to NATO? And I said yes, based on my talks with the Americans, with the talks the American president and his team had with the French president, with so many other leaders, etc. I said, but there is an expectation coming with the commitment. An expectation is that they are fed up and extremely irritated with the fact that the Americans, on average, spend 3.4%, 3.5%, 3.6% on defense, and that here on the European and Canadian side, we are somewhere at 1.9%. Because we are very rich countries. Of course, the US is rich, but we are also very rich. So I said that commitment comes with an expectation that we will somehow equalize with what the US is spending. Now, to your question, and trying to give an answer. This whole process is not about an audience of one. It is about keeping 1 billion people safe. And to keep 1 billion people safe, we have assessed together these capability targets, the gaps we have, what do we need to do in terms of long-range missiles, maneuverable land formations, command and control, air defense systems, ×5 from what we have now. So this is a huge, huge investment in people, in equipment, newest technology, AI, etc. To keep ourselves safe. And yes, coming to 3.5% will also more or less equalize with the US. And I totally understand the US position that after even Eisenhower, when he was president, complaining about the fact that the Europeans and Canada were not paying what the US was spending on defense, that they want this settled now. So they are totally committed because the US knows that for their security, a secure Atlantic, a secure Arctic and a secure Europe is key. Jonas Sture, the Norwegian Prime Minister, was in the White House and he showed the American president this map of the biggest port in Russia, which has these huge submarines which are able to fire nuclear missiles onto the US.
So Mark Rutte, the Secretary-General of NATO there, giving his response to Israel's strikes on Iran overnight and talking about how crucial it was to de-escalate tensions in the region, a similar message that we've had from the British government this morning. We're going to come back to that developing story in a moment. In the meantime, though, we just want to focus for a moment on our other main story this morning. Aviation specialists will today investigate what caused an Air India plane bound for London to crash shortly after takeoff. 241 passengers and crew were killed, and rescue workers are continuing to search for missing people. Miraculously, one man, a British national, survived. Experts will be hoping to find the plane's black boxes, which hold data about the flight, including altitude and speed, as well as recordings of the pilots. Well, India's Prime Minister visited the crash site this morning and met some of the injured people being treated in hospital. Our India correspondent Neville Lazarus has more now from Ahmedabad.
Well, it was absolute shock and horror to see what happened yesterday. The Prime Minister came to this civil hospital, one of the biggest hospitals in Ahmedabad, and he visited the crash site, walking through a lot of the debris of that crash, and also into those buildings, those block of flats, which housed a number of medical students who who were interning and belonged to this hospital. He then came here and met some of the the survivors, including a number of students, but also met with Ramesh, the British national, who was the lone survivor, who sort of almost walked out unscathed. Last night I did manage to meet him in his ward. Access was very, very tight, but we did have at least 20-25 seconds of a meeting with him. I introduced myself. I asked him how he is. He did say he's okay. He nodded. He acknowledged. And then I was soon ushered out by plainclothes policemen and some of the hospital staff. But he looked fine. He was half sitting on his bed. He had bruises on his hands, a few on his face, and he was conscious. He was acknowledging. He was talking to others, to some of the attendants, and acknowledged my presence. And when I spoke with him, I even spoke to the first doctor, Dr. Sharik, who sort of treated him when he came to the hospital. He was brought by the ambulance. He said he had a slight limp while walking, but he looked fine. They did internal checks. He was okay. The only thing he said, he is undergoing a lot of mental trauma, and that you could very well imagine it, looking at the kind of social media pictures of this plane crash when it plummeted into the ground, erupting into a fireball. Here there are still DNA samples being taken of families out here, so that then they will give the bodies back to them, because some, a doctor was saying, are burnt and charred beyond recognition. But a real shock and horror for one of the worst aviation disasters this country has had.
Well, details of the 52 British nationals killed in the crash are beginning to emerge. And of course, we're learning more about the one passenger who survived. We've also heard from Gatwick Airport in the last hour. Our correspondent Oliver Whitfield-Miochik is at Gatwick Airport. So what are they saying, Oliver? Fill us in.
Good morning, Anna. Yes, we've heard from Stuart Wingate, who is the chief executive of Gatwick Airport. In a statement that was posted to the social media site X, he said, "We are very saddened to hear about the accident involving Air India flight AI-171, and our thoughts are with the family and friends of those on board. We can confirm flight AI-171 that was involved in an accident shortly after departure from Ahmedabad Airport on the 12th of June was due to land at London Gatwick." He goes on to say London Gatwick is liaising closely with Air India, and a reception centre for relatives of those on board is available with information and support. Now, separately, Air India has said one of the purposes of this reception centre is to facilitate the travel of relatives from the United Kingdom back to India, and once they get to India, that's when they'll have to do the formal identification processes, giving DNA swabs, visual recognition of the people who are involved in this crash, and then of course the repatriation flights back to the UK. And we're starting to learn some of the names of the 52 Brits who've died in this air crash, including the Nanabava family, that comprised of Akhil Nanabava, his wife Hannah, and their 4-year-old daughter Sarah. It's believed they were from the Gloucester area, and the headmaster of Sarah's school says that this was a family known for their generosity, their fundraising efforts, especially when it came to issues surrounding Gaza. He believes that this was a last-minute flight for the family to India, a last-minute trip to go away and have a holiday. Also amongst the dead is Jamie and Fingal Greenlaw Meek. Now, they are a British couple who run spiritual wellness centres in London and Kent. I've actually spoken to some of their colleagues who say that these were two men who were so caring and loving. They were fantastic employers to work for. In the hours before they set off from India, social media videos showed how they were in the departure lounge, joking around with each other, saying that they were wonderfully relaxed and calm coming back to the UK. And then, of course, we've got that survivor, the lone survivor of this tragedy, who comes from Leicester, 40-year-old Vishwash Kumar Ramesh, who you heard there. Our India correspondent Neville Laveris has seen in hospital. In Leicester, the family has spoken to Sky News, detailing how Vishwash had called the family just before the flight had taken off to say that the plane was ready to depart, and then a few minutes later called up to say that he did not know how he'd survived that fireball that had erupted after the Air India flight crashed into that residential area, or indeed how he got out of the plane. But this is a bittersweet moment for the family because Vishwash was actually travelling with his brother Nayan, and Nayan is known to have died in this crash. So the family have got this glimmer of hope that they've got one brother who has survived, but sadly the other one has not. So a family that has really been torn apart by this tragedy.
Oliver, thanks very much indeed. Thank you. So let's return now to our top story. And Israel has launched overnight strikes on Iran, targeting its nuclear sites. So this is where the strikes have been reported so far. In the capital, Tehran, where Iranian state media is reporting residential areas have been hit and civilian casualties have been reported. Khorramabad in western Iran, which is home to a large missile base, and Iran's main uranium enrichment facility at Natanz, where the International Atomic Energy Agency says no increase in radiation levels have so far been detected. Well, let's get the view now of the former head of the British Army's Chemical Weapons Unit, Hamish de Bretton-Gordon. Morning to you, Hamish. Thanks so much for talking to us today. What is your response? What do you make of the fact that Israel has launched these strikes on Iran? What's your reaction?
Well, I think, first of all, Israel's been telling us they're going to do this for some time. And the indications were this week, once it had been clear that Iran was actually enriching its uranium to weapons grade level, when President Trump's attempts to do this through negotiations seemed to have failed. It was, and also the Americans moving a lot of people around the Middle East to safety. It seemed pretty clear what was happening. It's also clear that the planning of this has been probably going on for decades. The detail of the strikes that have happened could only have been done with the most comprehensive intelligence coming back from the ground. Not only of the nuclear sites, particularly at Natanz, as you say, where a lot of the research is going on, has been hit, and we understand quite comprehensively destroyed, but with no radiation, which is a positive thing. But also some very key senior military figures in the Revolutionary Guard, the leader himself, Soleimani, have been taken out as well. So a very, very comprehensive attack. And I think this is on the back of, I say it's been in planning for decades, but last year, Israel's security services took out Hezbollah, the Iranian militias who really ran Syria and Lebanon, and also the Houthis. So at this stage seems comprehensive how long it's going on for, and how Iran can retaliate. We know the Supreme Leader said they will be very interesting to see. I know Israel is prepared for sort of drones coming in, but Iran has been so denuded militarily in the last year or so that I think it'll find it very difficult. But if this does stop Iran getting a nuclear weapon, then on a strategic perspective, that is probably a good thing.
Well, yes, and how effective will this attack have been if the aim is to stop Iran developing a nuclear weapon? I mean, you called it a comprehensive attack, but how effective will it be in forcing Iran to shift its nuclear program, to make changes?
Well, I think it'll be very effective. It's not just Natanz that's been attacked, but at various other places. We know that in order to make a nuclear warhead, you need weapon-grade uranium enriched to about 90-95%. We understand that the Iranians have got to about 60%, and it's not a huge step going from 60 to 90. But if the centrifuges which conduct this process have been destroyed, and it would appear that certainly many of them have, then really Iran would have to start from scratch, start again, as it were. So I think this it might not completely take out the possibility that Iran could become a nuclear capable weapon nation in the future. But I think certainly for the time being, that is really taken away from them. I think the other thing to say is that last year, Israel took out a lot of the air defense sites. And as you mentioned, one of the key missile sites has been taken out too. So again, this is not just a single strike. Seems to be a comprehensive operation. And, to have two strategic operations in a couple of weeks, we saw Operation Spider's Web conducted by the Ukrainians in Russia 10 days ago, and then this. I think it's a demonstration, really, to the globe that actually, if you have comprehensive military and security capabilities, you can have strategic effect without sort of millions of tanks and all the rest of it. And let's hope our strategic defence review is taking note.
The US has said that it was not involved in these strikes. I wonder what you make of that. And will Iran look to retaliate towards the US as well as Israel when it does take action?
Well, certainly from the US perspective, we only know what they're saying. And it would be pretty strange if they were involved, certainly from a physical perspective. In other words, if US jets are involved, and that does not seem to be the case. Whether intelligence has been shared, who knows? Now, when it comes to retaliation, the Americans certainly think that they're in the firing line, which is why they've moved a lot of their staff out of embassies in Baghdad and other key capital cities. But again, I think with Hezbollah being so denuded, it's unlikely that they'll be attacked directly.
I'm sorry, I asked you a long, complicated question. Don't give you enough time to answer it. We are out of time, I'm afraid. Hamish de Brecon-Gordon, we appreciate your time. Thanks very much.
A show of military might and menace. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Have a quick word for Sky News. Is the West right, i.e. fueling Russia's war machine? American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display. I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
Hello, a very good morning. You're watching Sky News. It's 9 o'clock. Israel launches airstrikes on Iran against military and nuclear targets.
Israel launched Operation Rising Lion, a targeted military operation to roll back the Iranian threat to Israel's very survival.
The IDF claims it's killed Iran's most senior military commanders. Iran's supreme leader vows severe punishment for the attack and says Israel has brought a painful fate upon itself. In Israel, civilians have been evacuated to shelters and bunkers awaiting an Iranian response. And here, Sir Keir Starmer urges restraint and a return to diplomacy, saying escalation serves no one in the region. Hello, a very good morning. Thanks for joining us here today. Our breaking news today, Israel has launched what it calls a preemptive strike on Iran's nuclear facilities and other military targets. Benjamin Netanyahu promised the mission, dubbed Operation Rising Lion, would continue for as many days as it takes, saying Iran's nuclear program poses a threat to Israel's very survival. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, vowed a harsh punishment in retaliation for the attack, saying Israel has brought a bitter and painful fate upon itself, and it will certainly face it. Well, the strikes, including on the capital, Tehran, have killed the head of Iran's Revolutionary Guards, Major General Hossein Salami, according to Iranian state media. Well, Israel's military says 200 fighter jets completed strikes on more than 100 targets, including nuclear facilities in different areas of Iran. Israel's military claims Iran is advancing a secret program to build nuclear weapons and says Tehran has the capacity to make a nuclear bomb within days. Well, Iran's supreme leader says residential areas in Tehran have been hit, while the International Atomic Watchdog has confirmed the Natanz nuclear site was also targeted in the attacks, while Iranian media is reporting 2 of Iran's top nuclear scientists were killed. Well, this is where strikes have been reported so far. In the capital, Tehran, where Iranian state media is reporting that residential areas have been hit and civilian casualties are reported. Khorramabad in western Iran, which is home to a large missile base, and Iran's main uranium enrichment facility at Natanz. Well, the International Atomic Energy Agency says no increase in radiation levels have been detected. Well, Israeli military has confirmed that Iran has launched more than 100 drones towards Israel in the past few hours. And Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says it launched its strike because Iran's nuclear program poses a threat to the country's very survival.
Israel launched Operation Rising Lion, a targeted military operation to roll back the Iranian threat to Israel's very survival. This operation will continue for as many days as it takes to remove this threat. For decades, the tyrants of Tehran have brazenly, openly called for Israel's destruction. They've backed up their genocidal rhetoric with a program to develop nuclear weapons. In recent years, Iran has produced enough highly enriched uranium for 9 atom bombs. 9. In recent months, Iran has taken steps that it has never taken before, steps to weaponize this enriched uranium. And if not stopped, Iran could produce a nuclear weapon in a very short time. It could be a year, it could be within a few months, less than a year. This is a clear and present danger to Israel's very survival.
Well, let's take you live to Jerusalem and our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle, who's there. So, Alistair, just how significant were these strikes by Israel, and were they a surprise?
They were very significant, and they were a surprise. We'd had indications over the last 24, 36 hours that something might be afoot. In particular, the announcement by the United States to partially evacuate its embassy in Baghdad. But I don't think anybody was expecting now, partly because there were scheduled talks to take place, nuclear talks between Iran and the United States in Oman on Sunday. So I don't think anybody thought anything would happen before then. And then there has been quite clearly a deliberate strategy to deceive the Iranians. A number of things happened. Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's Prime Minister, made it known to Israeli media yesterday that he was still going to take a holiday this weekend up north in Israel, suggesting there was nothing to worry about. Ron Dermer, one of his right-hand men, and the head of the Mossad, David Barnea, were reportedly going to travel to another country to meet with Steve Witkoff, Trump's point man, ahead of those talks in Oman on Sunday. Well, that was never going to happen. That was complete deception. It was a ruse to throw Iran and everybody else off the scent. These plans for these attacks, we think, were signed off almost a week ago and have come into action now. There's been a lot of, there's been years of preparing Israel for this moment. The Israeli military and the Israeli intelligence agencies have been planning for a long time. Another indication of how much planning has gone into this. Incredible detail coming out about the operations of the Mossad, Israel's foreign intelligence agency. It's being reported very widely through well-sourced briefing here that Mossad commando units operating deep inside Iran had built a sort of a center of explosive drones. And the moment that the airstrikes were coming in on Iran, they launched these explosive drones at air defense systems and at ballistic missile systems in order to disable those. So it's very similar to what the Ukrainians did in Russia a couple of weeks ago. So this has been a multi-layered strike in multiple waves on Iran, on its nuclear facilities, on military targets, and on key personnel within Iran's military apparatus, but also the senior political advisor to the supreme leader as well.
What do you make of what the US has said in the aftermath of these strikes? They seem to have moved pretty quickly to distance themselves from those strikes. What do we know about what they knew about them?
I think they knew about them. I think they knew that this was coming, and I think therefore they supported them because I think, as we've seen in the past, if Donald Trump has opposed something that Benjamin Netanyahu is planning or is doing, then he has tried to put a stop to it, either publicly or privately. I think the Americans knew, but they have come out, particularly Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, to say that the US wasn't involved. Now, okay, it might not have been involved militarily in their strikes, but their knowledge of it meant that one assumes they gave it political backing. And I think the Americans are now ready, if they haven't already done so, are ready to provide defensive support to Israel for any incoming Iranian attacks. We've had news that more than 100 drones are on their way to Israel. They take a long time to get here. I know we've been saying that hour after hour, but they do take a number of hours to get here. But we've already heard reports of interceptions taking place over Syria, even over Saudi Arabia, over Jordan. Amman, I can see the Jordanian capital actually up on the hills behind me. Sirens sounded a couple of hours ago in Amman. So this is pulling in the region. And we've had a lot of statements of condemnation, particularly from the Gulf states, condemning Israel's actions overnight. They are strong statements. They are strong language. But I wouldn't read too much into that. There is not a lot of love lost for Iran amongst many countries in the Middle East. And some of these countries might not have an enormous amount of affection for Israel. But I think privately, quite a number of countries in the region will be happy to see Iran getting a bloody nose. But of course, they will also be incredibly concerned about the consequences of what might happen next.
OK, Alistair, we'll be checking in on you regularly to get all the latest updates. But for the moment, thanks very much indeed. Well, Iran's Tasnim news agency has released a statement attributed to the country's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. It reads, "This regime must await severe punishment. By God's will, the powerful arm of the Islamic Republic's armed forces will not let it go unpunished." In the enemy's attacks, a number of commanders and scientists were martyred. Their successors and colleagues will immediately continue their duties, God willing. With this crime, the Zionist regime has brought a bitter and painful fate upon itself, and it will certainly face it. Well, meanwhile, NATO's Secretary-General Mark Rutte says the focus over the next 24 hours must be on de-escalation.
It is obviously a rapidly evolving situation. This was a unilateral action by Israel. So I think it is now crucial for many allies, including the United States, to work as we speak to de-escalate. I know they're doing that. And I think that is now the first order of the day.
Well, our international affairs editor Dominic Waghorn has been following events throughout the morning.
Yeah, this is the big one. This is the moment that I think that people across the Middle East have been waiting for and expecting at some point for years, and something that the Israeli leader, Benjamin Netanyahu, has threatened and kind of made it a lifetime ambition to make happen for so long. And it does seem to be the real thing. You know, as you said, we've had Israeli attacks on Iran before, and of course we had the first direct sort of hostilities between these two sworn enemies last year. But this is the moment, it seems, where Israel has decided that it is now time to try and take out the Iranian nuclear program. Netanyahu's kind of made it an ambition of his to destroy this, what he regards, or says he's regarded at least, as an existential threat against Israel for years. Now, he clearly believes that Iran has been seeking to develop the technology to fulfill its threat to erase Israel off the face of the earth. And he's always said that this is effectively his sacred duty as a leader of the Jewish state to stop that happening and to remove from, or take away from, the Iranians any ability to do so. Now, what he said in this statement overnight is that he believes the Iranians have gone a step farther than what they've ever done before. They've tried to enrich uranium. They agreed to not do so and to hand over their enriched uranium under the JCPOA, as it's called, the Iranian nuclear deal. But then Donald Trump ripped up America's signature on that deal, and Iran went back to enriching uranium and has most recently developed enough fissile material. You have to basically spin uranium in centrifuges to develop the fissile material, make it enriched enough to be able to turn that into a bomb. And it had produced enough of that, the Israelis and American and other Western intelligence agencies believe, to produce 9 nuclear bombs relatively recently. But to actually turn that into an effective nuclear bomb that you could then deploy would have taken between 18 months to 2 years longer. Now, what the Israeli Prime Minister is saying is that he believes, and his Israeli intelligence agencies believe, that the Iranians have gone to that next step of trying to weaponize its fissile material stockpile. And the reason it was doing so is certainly the implication of what the Israeli Prime Minister is saying, is that its other insurance policy, which was Hezbollah and Hamas, these proxy allies on the sort of doorstep of Israel, have been destroyed by Israel, and therefore the Iranians are looking for a plan B, and therefore we're going hell for leather to build the bomb. I think the big question now, of course, is what does Iran do in response? We've heard, as you say, the Ayatollah Khamenei, the supreme leader, responding there, but also from Iran military, the Twitter accounts that the Iranian military has, saying simply this will not be, talking about its retaliation, a mere demonstration of will or technological capability. This time our response will be lethal. So basically saying that those attacks, those ballistic missiles we saw last October, were a demonstration of will. What the world's going to see now is going to be very different, and it may not be aimed just at Israel.
Dominic Waghorn there. Amanda has joined us, our political correspondent, of course, and there has been plenty of political reaction this morning, hasn't there, here to these strikes by Israel?
Yes, indeed, and really starting very early doors today with a response from Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, really urging de-escalation, restraint, diplomacy, really quite balanced kind of statements, not expressing solidarity with Israel or criticism of Iran. Let me read you what the Prime Minister had to say. He said, "The reports of these strikes are concerning. We urge all parties to step back and reduce tensions urgently. Escalation serves no one in the region. Stability in the Middle East must be the priority, and we are engaging partners to de-escalate. Now is the time for restraint, calm, and a return to diplomacy." Very similar message from David Lammy as well, although he also described it as a dangerous moment, saying he urges all parties to show restraint. And that was very much the message we had from the Minister, who we spoke to earlier today, Sarah Jones, who is Industry Minister, who insisted that the UK hadn't been involved at all operationally in any way with these strikes. Let's have a listen.
Did the British government have prior knowledge of the strikes?
We weren't involved in the strikes. Obviously, I can't talk about information about what we did or didn't know. That wouldn't be appropriate. But the priority now, I know, for the Foreign Secretary, who will be leading on this, working closely, of course, with the Prime Minister, is to work with our allies to urge restraint and to de-escalate.
Now, she wouldn't go into the detail of whether or not the UK knew about this in advance, although the UK clearly, as she says, weren't involved. It's quite interesting to note that David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, was actually due to be flying out to Washington today for talks with Marco Rubio about Russia. They've now been cancelled. We're told he needs to be in the UK, obviously, to deal with this situation there, but I think that says something about how this perhaps took the UK government by surprise. We also understand that the UK warplanes aren't going to be involved in any way in the defence of Israel in against any the retaliation from Iran that's expected and indeed underway with those drones, which is something that previously the UK had been prepared to do last year when we saw attacks between the two countries. UK warplanes were involved in the skies above Israel, helping protect their airspace there, although UK planes could be sent out to Cyprus if that situation did change. I think it's quite interesting the fact that the UK official statements haven't said anything about Israel's right to self-defense, obviously, which they have done previously, although obviously that was a kind of different situation when we saw Iranian attacks on Israel, first of all, last year. There has been a slightly more critical line about Iran given by a number of other politicians. So Ed Davey saying the UK must work with allies to constrain Iran's nuclear ambitions. James Cleverly, the former Foreign Secretary, talking about how the international community were too slow and too meek in response to Iran's efforts to develop nuclear weapons, saying he's not surprised that Israel has taken this action. We have just also had a response from Kemi Badenoch as well, saying Iran must never be allowed to obtain nuclear weapons. Our immediate focus must be on stabilisation, working with our allies, but we need to be clear-eyed about the reality. The world is becoming more dangerous. Britain must be ready to defend itself, so that playing into the whole narrative of the UK's defence spending there. Earlier you spoke to Richard Holden, who is the Tory Minister, Paymaster General, and his response was very much also, I think, supportive of that UK official message about diplomacy and de-escalation, but for him it was very much linked to the entire situation in Israel and the quest for a two-state solution.
Okay,
What I want to see is stability restored, to see peace restored as quickly as possible, because I want to see us move towards a two-state solution for Israel, Palestine, and also Israel normalising relations with its neighbours. That is obviously going to be very difficult when at the moment you've got certain regimes, like the Iranian regime, who wish to see Israel cease to exist as a country. I think we need to see actually a move towards mutual acknowledgement and to try and de-escalate the situation in the Middle East, because I don't think it will serve anyone if we end up in further conflict.
The other question is obviously UK personnel based in Iran and the wider region. The US evacuated some of its embassies nearby during the week. We haven't had any such message to UK officials out there, although the official advice from the Foreign Office is really to monitor very closely what they are saying, and obviously it's something that they are looking at carefully.
Well, interestingly, on that subject, I'm just saying here, Sky News understands that Israel's embassies around the world, including in the UK, have been instructed to take additional security measures in the wake of the strikes on Iran. So that news just in, Amanda. So another interesting development there. Amanda, thanks very much indeed. Now, Israel's President Isaac Herzog has released a statement on X saying the attack was a targeted operation to neutralise an immediate and existential threat. He goes on to say the international community has seen how, over the last decades, the Iranian regime at the helm of a global terror empire has continued to radicalize and destabilize the region with its proxies while working relentlessly to advance its military nuclear capabilities and expand its ballistic missile arsenal. Iran's leaders have made no secret of their openly repeated intention to annihilate the state of Israel. Israel has the inherent right and the solemn duty to defend itself and will always do so with determination and clarity. Well, let's bring in our security and defence editor, Deborah Hayne, who's here. So, Deborah, talk us through what these strikes have involved. The Israelis talking about 200 jets, haven't they, overnight?
200 jets, 100 targets, more than 300 missiles and bombs dropped on them. Clearly, they're talking about this as being the start of an operation. We've heard from the Israeli Prime Minister that the intent is to go after Iran's nuclear program, but military experts in the past who I've spoken to have always said, because this has been a long-running potential, because obviously Israel views Iran's nuclear program as an existential threat to the state of Israel. Iran has always maintained that it does not harbour any ambition to develop a nuclear bomb, and its nuclear program is purely civilian. The UK, for example, doesn't believe that either. But military experts have always said that Israel doesn't have the full capability to be able to do the sort of damage to the nuclear program that would be necessary to completely derail it and set it back significantly. And that's because it's an American aircraft that carry the size of bombs that can get through, for example, the Fordo nuclear plant, which is buried in a mountain near the city of Qom, to be able to get through that the mountainside, to be able to cause damage to the infrastructure internally. And that is what would be needed to seriously set back the program. But others have argued that actually Israel does have increased capability to be able to inflict damage. Key will be to see what actually has been done. And clearly, as it does seem to be the start, it would suggest that there will be more attacks. And over the past year or so, Israel has conducted operations into Iran and around in neighbouring countries, taking out air defence systems that would have seriously posed a challenge to its military as it conducts these raids. And also the attack against Hezbollah, the degrading of Hezbollah, a key ally of Iran, and also a key deterrent for the Iranians to use against Israel previously, to not conduct this kind of raid in the knowledge that Hezbollah would fire overwhelming force into Israel from Lebanon. That's been taken away. So clearly it's a moment of opportunity. But like I say, we need to wait and see what the actual damage has been inflicted is.
OK, Deborah, thanks very much indeed. Thank you. Well, let's get more reaction now. Joining me now is former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett. A very good morning to you. Thanks so much for joining us here today. First of all, do you welcome Benjamin Netanyahu's move to strike Iran overnight?
Yes, this is a move for the defense and the very existence of the state of Israel, including all Israelis, left and right, opposition and coalition. And all Israelis stand behind the dire need, the vital need to remove the nuclear menace of Iran from Israel, from the Middle East, and from the world.
And in fact, I know that you did put a post on X saying that Israel's strike was carried out at the last moment possible. I wonder what specific intelligence you're aware of that led the government to conclude that this was the final opportunity to act.
It's a combination of three things. The amount of highly enriched uranium, only military grade, which is enough for 10 nuclear warheads. It's the fact that they're moving forward to turn it into a military device, into a bomb, if you will. And third, a unique window of opportunity where we took out their air defenses as a retaliation of their prior attacks over the past year. They attacked Israel twice with hundreds of missiles. So now we have the last moment before they acquire a nuclear weapon and a narrowing window of opportunity. This was the time to remove this nuclear nightmare from the entire Middle East.
And yet there are many observers who say that Iran was not as close as Israel has said to developing a nuclear weapon. And they warn that the strikes by Israel on Iran could, in fact, incentivize the country to take that step and move towards developing a nuclear weapon.
You know, Iran has developed football fields of cascades of enriching uranium.